The night was quiet in Amsterdam. Outside, the air was cold, and the streets were empty. Inside a narrow building near the canal, a candle flickered weakly, and a girl bent over her desk, her pen moving quickly across a red-checked diary. She was only 13 years old, but her words carried the weight of a world falling apart. Her name was Anne Frank. She paused for a moment, listening to the soft creaks of the house, and then wrote again, hoping that one day, someone would read what she was living through. She wanted her words to matter. She wanted them to survive even if she didn't. Anne was born in June 1929 in Frankfurt, Germany. Her father, Otto Frank, was a calm and thoughtful man who ran a small company. Her mother, Edith, was gentle, and her older sister, Margot, was everything and wasn't quiet, serious, and well-behaved. Anne was full of life. She loved reading, talking, and laughing. She had a sharp wit, a curious mind, and an endless stream of questions about everything around her. Her childhood should have been filled with school, friends, and games, but history had other plans. In 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany. His hatred for Jewish people quickly turned into laws that stripped them of their rights. Suddenly, Jewish families were banned from schools, jobs, and public life. Anne's parents decided to move before it was too late, leaving behind their home and everything they knew. The Franks settled in Amsterdam, hoping to find safety there. For a few years, life was peaceful. Anne went to school, learned Dutch, and made new friends. She loved the city's canals, the open skies, and the sense of freedom. Her father ran a small spice and pectin business, and the family began to feel at home. Anne's report cards were filled with comments about her talkativeness and imagination. She dreamed of becoming a writer or an actress someday. But in September 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, everything began to change again. The sound of war spread across Europe like a storm, and by May 1940, that storm reached the Netherlands. German soldiers marched through the streets of Amsterdam, and Nazi flags fluttered over buildings. For Jewish families like the Franks, life quickly narrowed. They had to register as Jews and wear yellow stars on their clothes. They could no longer visit parks or cinemas or ride bicycles. Their friends began to vanish. Anne watched the world she knew slowly disappear, and her diary became her only refuge. On her 13th birthday, her father gave her that red-checked diary, not knowing that it would one day become one of the most famous books in the world. In her first entry, she wrote that she wanted a friend she could trust completely. She named her diary Kitty. Through Kitty, Anne began to pour out her thoughts and feelings. She wrote about her classmates, her love for stories, and her frustrations with being treated like a child. Her words were lively and honest, filled with humor. But beneath them ran an undercurrent of fear, a growing awareness that life was about to change forever. In July 1942, a letter arrived for her sister Margot. It was a summons from the German authorities ordering her to report to a labor camp. Everyone knew what that meant. People sent to those camps never came back. Otto Frank didn't wait. For months, he had been preparing a hiding place above his office building. It was a secret annex, hidden behind a movable bookshelf. The time had come to disappear. The next morning, the family left their home in silence. They couldn't carry suitcases, that would attract attention. So they wore layers of clothes, one on top of another, even though it was summer. The streets were still and gray as they walked through the rain, their hearts pounding. Anne wrote later that it felt like stepping into another world, a world of shadows. When they reached the building, Otto led them up the narrow stairs and through the hidden door. Behind the swinging bookshelf was a series of small rooms connected by steep steps. There was barely enough space to move. The windows were covered with thick black curtains. It smelled of dust and fear. "This will be our home," Otto said quietly. And looked around. The walls were bare, the rooms empty. She was frightened, but she was also curious. She pasted pictures of movie stars and postcards on the walls to make her room look cheerful. For the first few days, she tried to treat it like an adventure. But as the silence deepened, the reality sank in. They were prisoners in their own refuge. Soon, another family joined them, the Van Dons, Otto's business partner and his wife, along with their teenage son, Peter. Later, a dentist named Mr. Dussel arrived. 8 people now shared that small space. During the day, they couldn't make a sound because the workers downstairs might hear them. No one could flush the toilet, walk in shoes, or even talk above a whisper. Anne wrote in her diary that she sometimes felt like a bird whose wings had been clipped. Every footstep was dangerous, every knock on the wall made their hearts race. At night, when the office below was empty, they could move a little more freely. Anne would stand by the covered window and peek outside. She missed the sky most of all, the clouds, the moon, the wind. She wrote that just seeing the stars gave her courage to keep going. Her words were full of longing. "As long as I can see the sunshine and the sky, I cannot be unhappy." Even in fear, she found beauty. Even in confinement, she found hope. Time in the annex moved strangely. Days blurred together. The people living there grew irritable and tense. Arguments broke out over food, over chores, over noise. Anne often clashed with her mother, who wanted her to be quiet and obedient. But Anne couldn't silence her thoughts. Her diary became her escape. Through it, she could be honest in ways she never could aloud. She wrote about her fears, her dreams, her loneliness, and the small moments of happiness that still existed: a joke shared, a new book to read, a helping hand from the friends who risked their lives to bring them supplies. Outside, the war raged on. Sometimes they heard bombings in the distance, the rumble of planes passing overhead. The radio whispered of battles, of hope that the Allies might win. Inside, they waited and prayed that someone would remember them. Each day was a test of patience and faith. Anne began to see how different people revealed their true selves in fear. Some became selfish, others kind. She was growing up faster than she ever imagined. In one entry, she wrote, "I still believe, in spite of everything, that people are truly good at heart." Those words would later echo across generations, but for now, they were written by candlelight, in a small room behind a bookshelf, by a girl trying to make sense of the darkness around her. As months passed, Anne's writing deepened. She didn't just describe what happened, she tried to understand it. She saw how hatred could poison nations, how silence could destroy lives, and how hope, even when fragile, could keep a person alive. Her diary was not just a record of days in hiding, it was a mirror of the human spirit refusing to surrender. That night, as she closed her diary, she listened to the faint sounds of the city: the distant church bell, the whisper of wind against the window. She knew that beyond those walls, the world had gone mad, but inside her heart, something pure still lived: the will to dream, to write, to believe. She blew out the candle and lay down in the darkness. The annex fell silent again, but in that silence, her words burned brighter than ever. The days in the secret annex dragged on like a long shadow stretching across Anne's life. Each morning she woke to the faint creak of the floorboards below and the soft whisper of her family stirring. They moved quietly, almost like ghosts, careful not to make a sound that could betray their presence. The summer of 1942 had passed, and with it went the warmth of freedom. Anne began to notice little things she had taken for granted: sunlight spilling across the streets, the laughter of children playing, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, and each memory stung with longing. The world outside, once ordinary and safe, now felt distant and unreachable. Every knock on the wall, every footstep in the offices below made her heart leap with fear. Yet, in the quiet moments, she still clung to hope. Anne's relationship with her mother was complicated. Edith was loving but strict, and the close confines of the annex made tensions rise. Anne felt smothered at times, her fiery spirit clashing with her mother's quiet, cautious nature. She often confided in her diary, telling Kitty about her frustrations, her jealousy of Margot's calm and obedient demeanor, and the suffocating weight of fear that hung over every day. Her father, Otto, was the anchor for the family. Calm, intelligent, and endlessly patient, he tried to shield them from despair. But even he could not erase the harsh reality that pressed in from every direction. Peter Van Dawn, the teenage boy who shared the annex, became a central figure in Anne's life. Shy and awkward, Peter was unlike anyone Anne had known. At first, their interactions were tentative, filled with teasing and misunderstandings. But slowly, they discovered shared hopes and fears. Anne's diary captures the evolution of their bond with remarkable sensitivity. She wrote about moments of laughter in the kitchen, whispered conversations late at night, and the strange comfort of feeling understood in the midst of fear. These small connections became lifelines, fragile threads of human connection holding them together. Food was a constant source of anxiety. The helpers, MEP and BEP, risked their lives to bring supplies, but there was never enough. They rationed carefully, sharing every scrap. Even a small treat, like a piece of chocolate or a few slices of bread, became a cause for celebration. Anne noticed how hunger sharpened tempers and how fear made people cling to small comforts. Despite the scarcity, the annex became a place of creativity. Anne read voraciously, studying grammar and history, and continued writing stories and essays for Kitty. She experimented with new styles, exploring her own voice in ways that might have seemed bold in another time, but here, in hiding, words were freedom. Outside, the war was relentless. The radio, smuggled by the helpers, whispered of bombings, arrests, and deportations. Anne tried to understand the world through snippets of news, piecing together stories of suffering and resistance. She noted how fear could dominate, how courage could shine in the darkest moments. In her diary, she reflected on the human capacity for both cruelty and kindness. The contrast fascinated her. The same people capable of heroism could also betray those they once called neighbors. These observations deepened her writing, giving it a maturity beyond her years. As the seasons changed, Anne's body and mind were tested in new ways. Winter brought bitter cold, and the annex, poorly insulated, became even more confining. Every cough, every shiver, reminded them of their vulnerability. Yet, Anne's energy and curiosity never fully waned. She continued to explore ideas, read novels, and even attempted to learn French in secret. She wrote about her dreams of traveling, of becoming a writer, of seeing the world outside the annex's walls. Each page of her diary became a small rebellion against the suffocating fear that defined their days. Despite the tension, there were moments of unexpected joy. Anne described singing quietly with her mother, joking with Peter, and imagining the world beyond their prison. She would sketch, fold paper into shapes, and sometimes write plays and stories with her own version of reality where freedom existed, where the war had no power. These moments, fleeting as they were, sustained her. She learned to find light in shadows, laughter in silence, and hope in the face of overwhelming uncertainty. The dynamics in the annex were not always easy. Conflicts arose over trivial matters, stolen food, disagreements over chores, or the strain of constant confinement. Anne, often outspoken, sometimes clashed with Mr. Van Don, whose selfishness irritated her. Her parents tried to mediate, but the pressure of hiding, the constant fear, and the lack of space made tempers flare. Through it all, Anne continued to observe, analyze, and reflect in her diary. She noted human behavior with insight, understanding that fear and stress could transform people in ways that were both heartbreaking and revealing. Friendship with Peter deepened during these times. They shared secrets, hopes, and quiet conversations that allowed both to forget, briefly, the walls that trapped them. Anne felt the stirrings of young love, the complicated emotions of attraction, jealousy, and vulnerability. Her diary captured these feelings with honesty, recording the nuances of her growing awareness of herself and others. She also found comfort in writing letters to Kitty, as if speaking to a trusted confidant who understood the unspoken fears and dreams of her heart. Anne's relationship with her own fears was complex. She was often terrified of discovery, of being caught and separated from her family, yet she refused to let fear dominate her thoughts. She sought meaning and beauty even in the smallest details, the way sunlight struck a dusty window, the sound of a distant bird, the warmth of a shared meal. Through writing, she created an inner world that gave her agency when the outside world offered none. Her words became both shield and sword, protecting her mind and spirit from the encroaching darkness. In the annex, time had a strange quality. Days bled into each other, marked not by appointments or school schedules but by the routine of survival. Anne measured life in whispers, meals, small accomplishments, and pages written in her diary. Each day was both monotonous and precious, a paradox that she captured with keen insight. She observed how each person reacted differently under stress, how relationships could deepen or strain, and how moments of kindness could shine even in despair. Anne's reflections were not limited to the immediate dangers. She wrote about justice, morality, and humanity. She pondered why hatred could be so strong, why some people chose cruelty while others risked everything to help strangers. Her questions, often rhetorical, hinted at a mind already grappling with philosophy, ethics, and the meaning of life. In her diary, she sometimes imagined a world where people treated each other with compassion, where fear did not dictate behavior, and where children could grow without the shadow of persecution looming over them. Even in these trying circumstances, Anne's creativity flourished. She drafted short stories, plays, and essays, often using her imagination to explore lives beyond the annex. She created characters, dialogues, and worlds that contrasted sharply with her own confined reality. This imaginative life became a sanctuary, giving her a sense of freedom and agency. Each word written was a small victory over the oppression surrounding her, a way to assert her identity and humanity. Throughout it all, hope remained Anne's constant companion. Even as the news from outside grew darker, even as shortages and fear pressed heavier, she continued to dream. She imagined a life beyond the annex, a world where the war had ended, where she could study, travel, and write freely. These visions of the future were fragile yet persistent, the threads of possibility that kept her spirit alive. Anne's diary captured more than her experiences, it reflected her growth. She became more introspective, more empathetic, and more aware of the complexities of human nature. She wrestled with her own identity, her role in the family, and her desire for independence. Each page was a testament to resilience, a chronicle of a young girl's courage in a time when courage was measured not in battles fought but in the quiet act of surviving each day. Even in the smallest moments, a shared laugh with Peter, a whispered conversation with her mother, or the faint sound of life from the city below, and found reason to hope. She wrote to Kitty not just to record events but to give shape to her feelings, to understand herself and the world around her. In doing so, she created a legacy of thought, emotion, and humanity that would outlast the walls of the annex and the darkness of the time. And so, life continued in the hidden rooms above the office. Fear was constant, yet Anne's courage, curiosity, and creativity persisted. Each day was a struggle to survive, a challenge to remain human amidst dehumanizing circumstances. Yet through it all, Anne wrote, observed, and dreamed. She discovered the strength that comes from hope, the comfort of words, and the power of imagination to create freedom even when the world is closing in. The war outside was relentless, and the future uncertain, but in the small rooms of the secret annex, a girl with a red-checked diary refused to let the darkness define her. Her pen moved across the pages with determination, capturing not only the horror and fear of her time but also the enduring light of human spirit. Anne Frank, still so young, was becoming a chronicler of life itself, a witness to both the cruelty and beauty of the world, and through her words, she would leave a voice that could never be silenced. Winter deepened in Amsterdam, and the narrow rooms of the secret annex grew colder with each passing day. Anne often huddled under blankets, her diary open on her lap, the candlelight flickering against the walls. Outside, the city was blanketed in gray skies and damp streets. Even in hiding, the sound of footsteps from the offices below reminded them that danger was never far. But Anne refused to let fear dominate her thoughts entirely. She had learned to discover beauty in small things: the silver glint of moonlight on the canal, the smell of rain on cobblestones, the soft hum of a distant song carried by the wind. These fleeting moments became treasures, glimmers of freedom that no walls could contain. The routines of life in the annex had become second nature, but the strain of confinement began to show in everyone's behavior. Conflicts arose over trivial matters: the Van Don family argued over food, Anne's mother scolded her for speaking out too boldly, and Peter sometimes retreated into silence, brooding alone in his small room. Anne noticed how fear could warp personalities, making even kind people act selfishly. Yet she also observed resilience, courage, and moments of generosity that reminded her of the complexity of human nature. Through it all, her diary remained a sanctuary. Kitty heard her frustrations, her laughter, her jealousy, and her dreams with the patience and understanding that no living person could always provide. Anne's relationship with Peter grew more complicated as time went on. At first, she had teased him, finding his awkwardness amusing. But as the weeks passed, she discovered in him a quiet sensitivity that matched her own. They shared conversations that stretched late into the night, speaking of the future, of school, of the world beyond the annex, and felt the stirrings of affection, a new and confusing emotion that both excited and frightened her. She described her feelings in detail in her diary, analyzing every glance, every word, every touch with the honesty of someone discovering the depths of human emotion for the first time. The news from outside the annex grew steadily darker. Radio reports spoke of deportations, of families torn apart, and of the increasing power of the German occupation. Anne listened in silence, heart pounding, as the reality of war pressed closer. Yet she also noted stories of courage: people who hid Jews at great risk, neighbors who whispered warnings, and resistance fighters who defied the occupiers. These tales inspired her, offering hope in a world that often seemed hopeless. She wrote about the contrast between cruelty and bravery, reflecting on the choices people make when faced with danger. Anne's own sense of identity continued to evolve. She grappled with her role as a daughter, a sister, and a young woman in a world that demanded obedience and silence. She struggled with her relationship with her mother, whose protective nature often felt stifling, and she admired her father's calm composure while recognizing the quiet sadness in his eyes. She observed her sister Margot with a mixture of envy and affection, admiring her poise and intelligence while longing to be understood in the ways only Anne could understand herself. The diary became a mirror, reflecting not just her fears but her growing awareness of herself as a distinct individual. Evenings in the annex were a delicate balance between danger and comfort. The workers below had left for the day, and the annex filled with soft footsteps and whispered conversations. Anne sometimes took these moments to write longer entries, to explore her thoughts in greater depth, and to dream vividly about the future. She imagined returning to school, traveling to distant lands, and writing books that would be read by people she would never meet. These imaginings were a lifeline, allowing her mind to soar even as her body remained confined. Anne also observed the psychological toll of prolonged hiding. The constant fear of discovery weighed heavily on everyone. Small mistakes, a dropped spoon, a loud cough, a misplaced newspaper could cause panic. Yet she noted how each person coped differently, some with humor, some with anger, some with withdrawal into silence. These observations deepened her understanding of human behavior, and she recorded them with precision and empathy. She began to see patterns in fear and courage, selfishness and sacrifice, learning more about humanity in the cramped rooms of the annex than she might have learned anywhere else. As the months passed, Anne's writing became more ambitious. She drafted short stories and imagined herself as a journalist or novelist, creating characters who faced trials and injustices similar to her own. Through these stories, she explored morality, justice, and the nature of hope. She also reflected on religion, philosophy, and ethics, questioning why people harmed each other and why some chose kindness even in the darkest times. Her diary entries were no longer just a daily record, they were essays on life, courage, and the human spirit, revealing a depth of thought far beyond her 13 or 14 years. Peter, too, became a source of insight and companionship. Anne described how his shy demeanor concealed a thoughtful and sensitive nature. They spent hours talking about books, their dreams, and the injustices they witnessed from afar. Anne sometimes felt frustrated with herself for the emotions Peter stirred, but she also recognized the comfort of having someone who understood, who shared her fear and her hope. Their bond became a quiet rebellion against the isolation imposed upon them, a reminder that human connection could survive even in the harshest conditions. The annex was also a place of small rituals that gave the residents a sense of normalcy. Birthday celebrations were subdued but meaningful, marked by whispered songs and tiny gifts. Reading aloud in the evenings, sharing morsels of chocolate, and telling stories created moments of joy that seemed almost miraculous in the shadow of war. Anne treasured these experiences, recording them with humor and tenderness in her diary. They were proof that even in confinement, life could still hold wonder and sweetness. Anne's reflections on fear, courage, and hope became more profound as winter gave way to spring. She began to understand that courage was not the absence of fear but the ability to act despite it. She admired the bravery of those who risked their lives to help the annex residents, and she found in herself a quiet resilience she hadn't known she possessed. Writing became both an act of survival and a form of resistance, a way to assert her humanity in a world that sought to strip it away. The diary, which began as a companion in solitude, transformed into a testament of Anne's inner life. She explored her dreams, her doubts, her joys, and her sorrows with remarkable honesty. She questioned the injustices she witnessed, reflected on her own behavior, and imagined a world in which kindness could triumph over hatred. Each page was a record of resilience, a chronicle of a girl determined to live fully in the moments she was given, even if those moments were cloaked in fear. Anne also contemplated the future beyond the annex. She imagined returning to school, seeing the streets of Amsterdam without fear, and reconnecting with friends and family who had not been able to escape persecution. These visions were fragile, but they kept her spirit alive. She understood that survival required both caution and hope, and she cultivated both with care. Her diary became a guide to navigating fear, an exercise in reflection, and a declaration of her belief in the possibility of a better world. Through it all, Anne's voice remained unwavering. Her observations, insights, and emotions were captured with a clarity and depth that belied her years. She wrote not only to document life in hiding but also to understand it, to make sense of a world that often seemed senseless. In her words, readers would later discover the complexity of human nature, the endurance of hope, and the power of imagination to sustain the spirit. Even as spring turned to summer, Anne never ceased to dream. She watched the trees outside bud and bloom, imagining a world in which she could walk freely beneath them. She noted the changing seasons with the precision of a naturalist and the sensitivity of a poet. The beauty of life persisted, even in confinement, and she sought it out in every detail: the pattern of sunlight on the floor, the sound of a bird outside the window, the laughter shared quietly among friends. These moments became anchor points, reminders that life could endure and even flourish in the harshest circumstances. By now, Anne understood that her diary was more than a record of days, it was a witness to the human condition. It captured the tension between fear and hope, selfishness and kindness, despair and resilience. Through her writing, she claimed a measure of control over a life that was otherwise governed by the threat of discovery. Her words were both shield and sword, a means of survival and a tool for understanding. As another night fell, Anne closed her diary with a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. She listened to the quiet of the annex, the soft movements of her family settling in, and the faint hum of life from the streets below. Fear remained, but so did hope. She had discovered the strength of her own mind, the depth of her compassion, and the enduring power of imagination. In the cramped, shadowed rooms of the secret annex, she had begun to understand what it meant to be human, not merely to survive, but to live fully, even when life was measured in whispers and shadows. Anne Frank, still a young girl, was becoming a chronicler of courage, hope, and the human spirit. Her diary was not just a companion, it was a testament to the resilience of life itself. And as she drifted to sleep, pen and paper set aside for the night, she carried with her the enduring belief that even in darkness, light could be found, and even in confinement, the human heart could remain free. Summer was fading, and the secret annex remained a fragile sanctuary, its walls holding together a family and a few trusted friends in a world that had become cruel and unpredictable. Anne could feel the tension rising, though she tried to mask it with her usual optimism and humor. Each day was measured in careful movements, whispered conversations, and tiny routines designed to avoid detection. The constant fear pressed on everyone, and Anne's diary became a confidant for emotions that could find no other outlet. She wrote not just to record events, but to process the complexity of life confined within these walls, and to explore the depth of her own heart and mind. Anne had grown more reflective. The fears that once dominated her writing were now balanced with thoughts about humanity, morality, and her own future. She questioned what it meant to be courageous and why some people risked everything to help others while so many looked away. She noted that bravery was not always dramatic, Sometimes it was silent, almost invisible, yet no less significant. The helpers who brought food and news, risking their lives for the lives of strangers, inspired her deeply. And understood that ordinary people could create extraordinary impacts through small acts of kindness and courage. Her relationship with Peter had reached a deeper, more intimate understanding. They no longer needed to fill every silence with words, even sitting quietly in the same room brought comfort. And had come to recognize that affection could exist alongside fear and anxiety, and that moments of human connection could provide solace even in the darkest times. She explored these emotions candidly in her diary, describing the tremor of excitement, the confusion, and the tenderness she felt. The presence of Peter, even in such a constrained environment, became a source of strength and hope, reminding her that love and friendship could survive even in fear's shadow. Yet, the reality of the world outside could not be ignored. News of increasing arrests and deportations reached the annex through radio broadcasts and whispers from the helpers. The fear that had always been present became sharper, sharper in its edge, a reminder that the walls around them offered protection but not immunity. Anne watched the adults around her, noticing the strain in their faces, the exhaustion in their movements. Her father, Otto, remained the steady anchor, but even he could not entirely shield them from the tension. Anne herself began to realize how much responsibility she felt not just for understanding her own emotions, but for observing, documenting, and making sense of the fear and resilience around her. Food remained scarce, and every meal became a careful negotiation. The smallest portion could ignite arguments, and Anne often witnessed selfishness and frustration at close quarters. Yet, even in scarcity, there were moments of generosity, sharing a scrap of bread, saving a piece of chocolate for someone else, or quietly cleaning a corner without being asked. Anne noted these moments with the same attention she gave to human folly, understanding that they revealed the best and worst in people alike. She wrote about the balance between survival instincts and moral choices, reflecting a maturity far beyond her years. Anne also grappled with her own identity and ambitions. She longed for a life of learning, writing, and exploration, imagining herself studying languages, traveling, and meeting people from distant lands. She dreamed of becoming a journalist or novelist, documenting life and human nature with honesty and insight. Her diary entries reveal not just a wish to survive but a profound determination to live fully, intellectually and emotionally, even when the world tried to confine her. Each word she wrote became a claim to her own existence, a declaration that she would not be defined by fear alone. As summer deepened, Anne began to notice the subtle passage of time in ways that frightened and fascinated her. The changing light through the small windows, the slow growth of plants visible outside, and the rhythm of the city beyond the annex became markers of both hope and anxiety. She reflected on the impermanence of life, the fleeting nature of happiness, and the inevitability of change. Yet she also found comfort in observing beauty in these details, asserting her humanity in a way that no external threat could diminish. Evenings became moments of quiet reflection, sometimes punctuated by laughter, stories, and the soft melodies of songs sung together. These small rituals reinforced their humanity, giving the annex a fragile sense of normalcy. Anne's diary became a repository not just for fear, but for these small joys. She recorded them in loving detail, understanding that these fleeting moments were proof of life's persistence, of the resilience of hope, and of the enduring capacity for happiness even in confinement. Anne's introspection also deepened into an exploration of morality and justice. She pondered why hatred could dominate, why some people acted selfishly, and why others risked everything to help those in need. She reflected on the stories she had heard from radio broadcasts, from the helpers, and from whispered rumors. and began to see patterns in human behavior, understanding that courage and cowardice, generosity and greed, could exist side by side in the same person. Her observations became philosophical, blending the experiences of a teenager with insights that could resonate with adults. She also became increasingly aware of the impermanence of safety. Every noise from below, every unexpected knock, every distant siren carried the possibility of disaster. Anne's writing reflected a tension between vigilance and the desire to live freely. She described her fear openly in the diary, but also her determination to endure, to find meaning and beauty in life even when danger was imminent. Her reflections reveal a remarkable ability to maintain hope while confronting the stark realities surrounding her. Despite these pressures, Anne continued to imagine the future. She pictured herself walking freely through Amsterdam, seeing friends, attending school, and living a life unbound by fear. These imaginings were delicate, often interrupted by the harshness of reality, but they were persistent. They gave her strength, offering a vision of life beyond confinement that she could hold onto even in the darkest hours. Her diary became a map of possibility, a way to navigate the tension between present danger and future hope. Her writing, increasingly sophisticated, explored themes of identity, love, morality, and the nature of existence. She questioned the meaning of life, the value of human connection, and the role of courage in an unjust world. Each entry was both personal and universal, a testament to the power of reflection under extraordinary circumstances. Anne's words reveal an understanding that survival alone was not enough. One had to preserve humanity, compassion, and creativity in order to truly live. The annex remained a place of quiet heroism. Each person's survival depended not only on secrecy but on courage, sacrifice, and small acts of kindness. Anne documented these acts meticulously, celebrating the bravery of helpers, the patience of her father, the resilience of her mother, and the small moments of generosity among the families. She understood that life, even when constrained, could reveal the best aspects of human nature, and she wrote with admiration for these qualities even as she faced her own fears. Time passed, and the weight of confinement grew heavier. Anne sensed the fragility of their situation, but she refused to let despair dominate. She found solace in her imagination, in her writing, and in her relationship with Peter. Even the simplest pleasures, a shared joke, a quiet conversation, the soft rustle of pages became significant, sustaining her through the endless tension. Anne's diary captures these moments with clarity, showing how a young mind could transform fear into creativity, uncertainty into reflection, and confinement into a canvas for imagination. As the final months in the annex approached, Anne's writing grew increasingly reflective. She considered mortality, the impermanence of life, and the responsibility to bear witness. She expressed a desire to continue writing even after the war, to share her thoughts and experiences with others. In these entries, there is a sense of urgency and poignancy, a recognition that time is fleeting and that the act of recording life is itself a form of resistance against oblivion. Her diary became not just a companion, but a legacy. Anne also explored the depths of her own emotional life. Her love for Peter, her frustrations with her mother, her admiration for her father, and her envy of Margot were all captured with honesty and depth. She examined her own behavior and emotions with precision, striving to understand herself in a world where so much was beyond her control. This self-reflection became a hallmark of her writing, revealing a mind attuned to both personal and universal truths. In these final months, hope remained Anne's guiding light. Even amid escalating danger, she clung to visions of a world beyond the annex, where freedom, learning, and human connection could flourish. She wrote of the importance of holding on to kindness, courage, and imagination, and of living fully in each moment. Her diary is filled with the quiet determination of a young girl who refused to let fear extinguish her spirit, capturing a remarkable balance between realism and optimism. Anne Frank's time in the secret annex ultimately became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Her words reveal the complexities of adolescence, the weight of confinement, and the profound capacity for hope and reflection in the midst of fear.